Hi there, my name is Dan Sokulski and I'm a recovery support specialist with a local treatment center in central Illinois. Also a member of the McLean County ROSC, Recovery Oriented Systems of Care, which is a community coalition where we try to bring recovery solutions to people in recovery from mental health, substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. And we started this channel just to bring recovery-oriented content to you, the person out there, whether you're in recovery yourself with lived experience, a family member, somebody who works in the field. And I myself am in recovery. My sober date's May 11, 2015. I want to talk about something that really helped me in the beginning of my, most recent recovery journey. I'm somebody who was in and out of treatment centers for about 7 years, from 2008 until my sober date. I finally went to a place that broke down, simplified the problem of alcoholism and addiction and the solution. So a lot of what I'm talking about today comes out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's just my experience. So I'm not endorsing AA in any way. I'm not endorsing any particular recovery program. I'm just sharing my experience and specifically how it helped to understand the difference between the real alcoholic and what they call the problem or hard drinker. So if you're not somebody who struggles with alcohol use disorder, you don't identify as an alcoholic, I would encourage you just to substitute whatever your drug of choice is. The same principles, the same ideas, the same solutions apply, in my belief, regardless of whether we're talking about benzodiazepines, heroin, alcohol. It really comes down to, am I the real McCoy? And if I am, what do I do about it? And can I stop on my own power, my own will, based on other people in my life pressuring me to, based on the legal system, giving me ultimatums based on the threat of losing a job, or do I need something bigger than myself? Okay, so just to clarify from a 12-step perspective, it's very clear that if you fall into this category of the real alcoholic, no amount of human power can relieve your condition. Now there are people who look very similar to, what we'll say, call alcoholic, as far as drinking every day perhaps, or when they do drink, if it's not on a regular basis, they still kind of lose all control. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't have control how much they drink. I guess that's more of a criteria for a real alcoholic, but there are people who drink regularly. It causes problems in their life. It causes relationship issues, causes employment issues. But ultimately, the problem or hard drinker who may have a lot of the same behaviors as an alcoholic can stop on their own power when they're sort of backed into a corner and they can just say, all right, that's enough, I'm done. Whereas our literature talks about this real alcoholic as somebody who needs to be grounded in a power greater than themselves. Okay, and that's where higher power, God, community, nature, whatever you want to refer to your higher power as, comes into play as a source of strength, something I can turn to when I need wisdom, when I need courage, when I need humility, when I need acceptance. And so I kind of reference some of the pages in the book where it specifically talks about this, and then this video will accompany a subsequent video we're going to do that simplifies the 12 steps. So really what we're talking about in this video is why work the 12 steps. And it really traces back to this issue, whether or not you need to if you're a real alcoholic or addict. And then if you make that decision for yourself, nobody can tell you whether you are. You have to face that with your own introspection, your own honesty to yourself, whether or not you qualify. And if you do, the 12 steps are still a great game in town in terms of, mass-producing spiritual awakenings, because ultimately the steps are designed to bring about a spiritual awakening, all right? Step 12, it says, having had a spiritual awakening, as the result of these steps, we carry the message to other alcoholics or addicts and practice these principles in all our affairs. So it's saying you will have a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And if you are a real alcoholic, you need a spiritual awakening, according to our literature, according to many of our own experiences. And so that's kind of the root of what we're trying to get at here. So referring to the AA Big Book, the 4th edition, in the chapter 2, there is a solution. At the top of the page, you may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us become so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? Now notice they use this word recovered. A lot of us probably, in meetings around the tables and treatment centers, there's this notion that, oh my gosh, I'm always going to be recovering. How dare I refer to myself as recovered? This is a fatal, progressive, chronic illness, and I will always be recovering. Well, actually, in our literature, in the first 164 pages, where it covers, the 12 steps and really the core of the solution, as we know, a lot of the rest of it is just personal stories. It refers to this word recovered over a couple dozen times. I think 32 when I last looked it up. It only really uses the word recovering in context of somebody who's recovering from a broken leg or a surgery or some kind of medical procedure. So the idea here is we recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. And one of the things that we'll talk about, but I will dabble in right now, is the 10th step. There are promises associated with all of the steps. So in other words, if you work this step, you are promised that this will happen in your life. So for instance, we hear a lot about the promises, which are really the 9th step promises. Those are read in a lot of meetings around the world. And if you didn't really have the background context, you just showed up for the first time, you might think, oh, these great things will happen in my life just if I go to meetings and hang out or get a paper signed or kind of just sit in the back and listen, don't really get into service or sponsorship or the steps. What it's really, the real context of those promises is you get to the point where you're halfway through with your 9th step, your amends, all these wonderful things will be occurring in your life. And it's things like comprehending the word peace and knowing serenity, losing fear of financial insecurity, So if you've heard these promises, it tells us all these wonderful things will occur. And we might have the impression that we just go to treatment or go to meetings and these promises will happen. But it's really saying, it's the 9th step promises, so it's saying if you do the work and you get to the point where you're making your amends, it even says if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. It's saying halfway through doing our amends, okay? And then it's all these great things that are promised to us. For example, and it's on pages 83 and 84, feelings of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. So it's saying, these promises will happen in your life if you do the work, going back to if I'm a real alcoholic and I need to work the steps because I need a spiritual awakening in order to recover because I've tried to do it based on human power and other people pressuring me to, that kind of thing. And if you're unable to stop on your own will, then there's a good chance you might be the real alcoholic. So what we're getting at here is as we go through the process of the steps, these promises, it's not that it might happen to you, it's not that it could, or there's a 50-50, 75-25 chance. It's a promise. They're written as that, and there's over 200 of them in the book. And it's saying, you do this, this will happen. And the 10th step promise is probably the most powerful of all, okay? And that's basically the obsession to drink or use drugs is lifted from us. We're placed in a position of neutrality, and these are on 84 and 85. But it basically says the problem is removed, okay? So when we get back to what I was saying with we're recovered from that hopeless state of mind and body, when we get to by the time we get to the 10th step and sometimes earlier, the obsession, that constant thought about, it's maybe in the background of our head when we're in early recovery, worrying about pulling off at the gas station on the way home, thinking about having a drink during, it's already 8 in the morning and you're wanting a drink or wanting to get high on a lunch break or something, that constant sort of churning, about worrying about stressors and triggers and that kind of thing. We are promised that we will recover. The problem is removed. We don't think of using or drinking any different than we would any other situation in our life if we do certain things. Okay. Now that's not gonna happen again just by having one foot in, one foot out. So we'll get into more of this. But what I want to sort of go back to now is this real alcoholic. Okay, so I'm back on page 20, and it uses the word recovered. Okay, so in other words, we get to a point when that 10th step promise occurs, the obsession is lifted, all these other promises are occurring in our lives, we are no longer sick. To be the way it was explained to me by some people with a lot more wisdom and long time than I did, that, saying I'm always recovering day to day kind of gives the sort of connotation that I'm still sick. We get to a point where we do the work, we take action, and we recover from that hopeless state of mind and body. Think of yourself at your bottom, right before you went to treatment, or right before maybe, as you were being arrested, just whatever that looked like as you were going through withdrawals, and just wallowing in that shame, that fear, that guilt. That sounds a lot to me like a hopeless state of mind and body. And so we do recover from that. The key is, though, it's not that we're cured. It's not that I can go drink again, once I've recovered. It's, this daily maintenance, okay? So it's saying you do recover if you continue to do the work. And I have from my own experience years ago where I had almost 2 years of sobriety, and first year was great. And I slowly but gradually stopped taking the actions that got me to that point. I got sick again, I drank again, and I was no longer recovered, right? It goes on to say on page 20, moderate drinkers have little trouble giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Things get bad enough, I can quit, all right? Alcohol has been a problem in my life, drugs have been a problem, maybe I'm a weekend warrior, it's getting a little bit out of control. When the pressure starts coming down on me, I still have the choice and the power of choice to, make a decision to stop. It says, then there we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or warning of a doctor becomes operative, this person can also stop or moderate, although they might find it difficult or troublesome. Problem drinker, hard drinker, it creates consequences in their life, it looks bad, but if there's sufficient reason, they can, when push comes to shove, they can stop. And then it says, what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker, he may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. All right, so they're describing that progression, the progressiveness of addiction, of alcoholism. It starts, just my own experience, high school, college, it's concerts, it's weekend parties, it's tailgates for, football games, that kind of thing. And then it becomes more of a daily thing, and then by the time for me anyway, it was always, well, once I graduate, I'll stop. Once I get married, I'll stop. Once I, begin a career, I'll stop, because I'll be working. I won't have time for it. And then it's once we have kids, I'll stop. And it just keeps getting, worse and worse. So even when people get to a point where they're able to abstain, there's this phrase, well, my disease is still doing push-ups in the parking lot. In other words, my disease is still progressing, and if just because I have, almost 6 years of sobriety doesn't mean that, I can drink like other people if I were to pick another drink up. In very short time, because of the progressiveness of the disease, I'd be back where I started within a short matter of time, and I have already plenty of experiences to demonstrate that. So moving on page 22, it's sort of painting this picture of what the real alcoholic looks like, in the previous couple pages, and it goes on to say, why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him or her that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it they take that one drink? Why can't they stay off the water wagon, or why can't they stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We're not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him or her. We can't answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from the drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. So what we're talking about here, again, is the physical part of the disease and the mental obsession. So thinking about, we can have some period of sobriety, pick up a drink, and we're very shortly right back where we were at our worst. It's not so much the case with the hard drinker or the problem drinker, but for the real alcoholic, another symptom is, it doesn't matter how long I've been sober, whether it's a week, a year, 10 years, When I put that back in my body, that drink or that drug, something different happens in my brain. And elsewhere in the big book, it calls it a peculiar mental twist or a mental black spot. And that's what basically classifies a real alcoholic as really almost a different subspecies of human, because we have this allergy, this abnormal reaction that occurs when we put the stuff back in our body. And that may not be the case for the problem drinker. And another thing it talked about, what I read there, is, the alcoholic reacts, has common sense and can apply their will and their sort of intuitiveness and their ability to navigate in and out of situations perfectly well when it comes to the workplace or problem solving or other financial situations perhaps, if they haven't done too much damage to that already. But the point is, the willpower, the common sense, the intelligence, the intuition that may serve them so well in other aspects of their life has no bearing when it comes to stopping their drinking or drug using. So that's where that loss of power or choice comes into play. We try to treat this disease, address this disease in the same way that we have other situations. I'm just gonna, buckle down. I'm just gonna, tighten my belt and stop. I'm gonna sort of man up or whatever. But it's a disease. We can't outthink. We can't out-research. We can't out-willpower a disease. Okay, so that's another thing going on. And so we get to that point where we have to get honest with ourselves and we have to, surrender and ask for help. And we'll talk about what that help looks like in a little bit here. Just a couple more things out of the book to sort of put the exclamation point on all this. Page 24 further talks about the symptoms or the reactions of a real alcoholic. It says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reason yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. Okay? So really just saying what I was just talking about there. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against that first drink. So what we're talking about here is another sort of difference is consequences, war stories, threats of what could happen in our life, what's already happened in our life in terms of losing homes, divorces, losing jobs, legal consequences. All that stuff, it's saying right here, really has no bearing on our ability to choose whether we continue to drink or not, or use, because we've already lost that power of choice. All right, that's where it moves from that physical into that mental state, where the obsession is in overdrive, and we've lost the power to stop on our own, because it's also a mental disease and our brain is basically hijacked at that point. So it doesn't matter somebody coming to me and telling me as I'm reaching my bottom, or as it looks like I'm losing control of my drinking, and saying, hey, you really need to stop, you're going to end up like me, who lost 3 cars, has to pay a certain percentage of my paycheck in alimony because I ruined a relationship, or you're going to end up with pancreatitis or some health disease or something. None of that has any bearing on us, because we can't even remember the suffering and humiliation of a week ago, it's saying here. So how's your war story or threatening me or telling me why I need to stop going to get me to stop, when my own suffering and incomprehensible and pitiful demoralization is not enough? Okay, so getting back to that loss of power of choice, huge aspect of being that real alcoholic. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. Book, it's based on, if you saw a previous video about the history of recovery, Carl Jung himself told Roland H. that he was a chronic alcoholic who was hopeless, and his really only chance of not drinking was to lock himself in a room, have somebody outside guarding the door to make sure no alcoholic people got in or out. That's the hopelessness we're talking about, locking ourselves up, going insane, jails, institutions, death. It says, unless we find some solution that's beyond human aid. And it goes on to say, there is a solution, the name of the chapter. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, they had recovered, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had never dreamed. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. Half measures will not avail us anything when it comes to the action that's required. And it says, we've passed into the region from which there's no return through human aid. We had but two alternatives. One, to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other, to accept spiritual help. A lot right there. And basically what it's saying is we've gotten to a point where, again, like I said at the beginning, no human power can relieve our condition. It didn't matter how much I wanted to stay sober for my wife, how much it made me cry and tore me up seeing my daughter bawling and hugging my leg as I have a suitcase and I'm going back off to treatment to be gone for another month because I screwed up, I relapsed, I failed. In my mind, that was what it was at the time. Didn't matter how much my parents yelled at me over the phone or how much I was told that I was weak, that I was selfish, all that stuff. Those are examples of human aid, human power, okay? So until I was ready to surrender and accept spiritual help, pick up the spiritual toolkit that's laid at my feet when I'm in treatment, when I start getting into a recovery program like a 12-step program, I basically was going to continue that spiral, going on a spree or relapsing or something, returning my return of symptoms, coming out of that remorseful with the resolution to never do it again, and then not really working a program, just trying to stay sober on willpower, and then I get restless, irritable, and discontent, and a drink or drugs started sounding like a good idea when stressors were introduced into my life. And then I pick up that first drink or drug, be off to the races, the allergy kicks in, I have a different reaction than other people, and the obsession, then comes next. At that point, I'm back to a situation where I have no power choice, and it's all about, my behaviors are all about what I have to do to get that next fix, basically. The lying, stealing, whatever it is. I wanted to stop, but I was, in a situation where I could not on my own power. Okay, so that kind of gets us to where we're at. The real alcoholic, if you haven't already sort of picked up on it, needs spirituality, a spiritual awakening, a vital spiritual experience, whatever you want to call it. We're not talking about religion here. I'm not saying that, once I started going to church, everything got better. I was raised Catholic. I went to church every week. I had all the sacraments, and I never developed a relationship with a Catholic God or with God, okay? I had that today, but it came through my journey through the 12 steps. Now, if you're in this category, and if you're wondering what category you're in, again, I said earlier, it's up to you to decide. All you got to do is turn to the book, bottom of page 31. It says, we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide. If you're honest with yourself about it, it may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. I've heard of very few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. So again, folks, it's not about how much I want to stay sober. It's not about passing a lie detector that, I have intentions to stay sober. It's not much about these resolutions I make in my mind and, these decisions that I make. It's about what actions am I taking, okay? What actions am I taking to grow along spiritual lines? All of the actions recommended in recovery, whether it's meetings, working with a sponsor, being of service, helping other people, praying and meditation, reading the literature, these are all designed to help us grow spiritually. And all a spiritual awakening is, in my opinion, is a connection to something bigger than me. It doesn't have to be a God thing. It's something that I know I can turn to, when I need something I don't have. Some kind of, extra push of strength, of determination, of resilience, of courage, of wisdom. And I didn't believe I could have that. But when I finally surrendered, I understood what this meant, and came to terms when I was honest with myself that I am a real alcoholic, and I've tried it this way. I've tried it to stop because of consequences and circumstances in my life, and it's just not working for me. Perhaps it is time to concede this to myself that I am a real alcoholic, and then the question is, what's next? What's next is I need to find a way to grow along spiritual lines. And again, that's what answers the question, why work the 12 steps? Okay? So if you feel you fall into this category, and it's not about how long you go in between intervals of using and drinking, it's about what happens when you put that stuff in your body. Okay? If you drink once a month, but every time you drink, you're out of control, and you say you're going to have 2, and you end up, going all night, or all sorts of crazy stuff happens, then you might be an alcoholic, or an addict. It's not about, again, whether you drink daily or how much you drink. It's about what happens to you when you put that stuff in your body. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got something out of it. We're going to break down shortly here just the 12 steps in general. They can be kind of intimidating for some people. They can be misconstrued. So all I'm going to do is share my experiences was passed down to other people. There's not much I say here that I've thought of myself. It's really just repetition of people who have walked the path before me and told me things that have helped me, and I'm just trying to be a vessel to pass those messages along to you all. But we'll break down the steps and try to make them simpler. Okay, just really break them down to what's the key idea, what's the principle behind each of these steps. Again, my name is Dan Sokulski. I'm with the McLean County ROSC, and thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.